It's Paul, and today I'm here with my DWS 773 Mitre saw to answer a question that was asked in the comments late last week about what do you do if you want more. To explain, I do apologise, I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the guy that asked the question, but he asked the question which often comes up: what if I want to cut more than 45 degrees? So there's my 45-degree cut, and on a fairly standard cheap mitre saw you can cut 45 degrees, well actually probably nearer 50 degrees one way, 48, 50 degrees the other way. If I move over to the other camera, we can see I can loosen the bevel adjustment screw, and I can then drop the saw over to 45, well actually about 46 degrees if I want to adjust the stops. I've got mine set exactly for 45 degrees. So what happens if you want to cut a sharper angle? Arbitrary angle that way. And to avoid disappointment, I will say at this point I'm not actually going to cut this, but I will explain. So first of all, let's talk about parameters. Hashtag disclaimer, be safe, all the rest of the OSHA, health and safety, whoever, malarkey. The designers of the saw built it to a set of parameters. This one goes 45 degrees one way, 45 degrees the other way, 45 degrees on the bevel. There are others that you can get that go 45 degrees in both directions on the bevel. And that's their design parameters. Far be it from me to pontificate on you should do this and you should do that, because I'm not going to. Anything you do is at your risk. I'm only going to demonstrate what I think is possible and how I think is possible. So, get on with it, Paul? Yes, certainly. But again, we are going outside the parameters that the saw was designed for, and it will bring you some problems. I'm not just talking about safety issues or all the rest of it. You will have problems, and I will explain that as well. So last week, Jimmy DeResta, I'll put a link to his video below, posted a video where he showed amongst other things cutting on a mitre saw, and he said, don't do this, just holding the wood and cutting freehand if you like. You'd need to watch the whole video to understand what it was about, because he wasn't actually saying don't do it, as far as I can tell. He was saying be careful and think about what you're doing, and I would say the same thing. But absolutely, you can cut freehand to any angle you like. So here's a skinny little bit of wood, and let's put an angle which is way more than 45 degrees. So there we go. And you could quite easily put your piece of wood on the saw and cut freehand. At this point, millions of people will come screaming into the comments, ha, as if millions of people watch my videos, but people will come in the comments and go, it's not safe, it's not supported, blah, 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 blah. In your opinion. In my opinion, if you want to go around job sites or even look on YouTube and all over the internet and everywhere forever, you will find guys with power saws traditional power saws, circular saws, with a bit of wood on a bench or on a trestle, and they will be holding the saw in their hand and cutting through quite adequately. Usually a bigger bit of wood than this, usually something like a 6x2 or whatever. Framers do it all the time. You see framers or roofers or construction guys, first fix, whatever, up in roof spaces, cutting joists, freehand or almost freehand. They might be up against a square, but freehand, power saw in one hand, piece of wood braced in the other hand. In my view, there's not a lot of difference between doing that and I'm cack-handed and doing this. I can pull the saw back, I can put the wood firmly onto the bed and I could saw through. Again, I'm not going to because it's not something I'll do. Why don't I do it? That's simple. I have a table saw and I have a jig on my table saw, not a table saw, sight saw, DeWalt sight saw, but effectively a portable table saw, and on that I have a jig where I can set up to cut narrow, thin, sharp angles. That's great if you've got one. I also have a track saw, so I could set my track up with the track running at an angle. But if you don't have any of them, you've only had one of these, you've got what you've got. So my view of it, and this links into the sight saw bit, I have a jig that my wood mounts to, or my workpiece mounts to, and the jig guarantees a straight path through the table saw. So in real terms, here's my jig, not very good because it's not square, but that goes up against the fence of the table saw, which keeps it parallel to the blade, and I screw my piece of wood to that and it cuts it through at an angle. And it's simple. And actually, there isn't really any reason why you couldn't do exactly the same. You could, I've put this the wrong way up now. If I put the line on the other side, you'll see it easier. I could have a squared off piece of timber in my saw. I could clamp that piece of timber. I could screw or clamp my workpiece onto my jig. And I would suggest that you might consider that perfectly safe. Again, as I say, I don't need to do it because I use my sight saw. But you're supporting the workpiece. You've got it clamped down. You can put the workpiece up against the fence at the back, so the offcut is supported, because that's another issue that people will gripe about. Oh, the offcut can go flying into the fence and bounce back and hit you in the face and blind you. Well, if you're not wearing safety goggles or glasses, more for you, but hey ho. Don't disagree. If you've got the workpiece right the way out here and the saw blade grabs the offcut, it could fling it into the fence and it could bounce off wherever you like. Very true. But if you put it right the way in and put it up against the back fence, it's not going to go anywhere. It's no different to cutting a 45-degree piece off. So I would suggest that that might be considered an adequate solution. Again, it's up to you whether you think it's an adequate solution. Just because I do doesn't mean it is. Maybe the safety police will arrive at my drive any second. You have to think about the consequences. If you're going to do something, you've got to think about the consequences. As I said, you're going outside the parameters. Now, I've talked about other problems. That's all very well if I want to cut a small piece off the end, right at the end of my timber. But I start to run into real problems when I want to cut a sharp angle on a longer piece of wood. So now I want to cut that angle halfway through a piece of timber, and I can't do it. The only thing I can do is cut it off at 90 or 45 degrees or whatever, and then put it so it stops up against the fence, because that's literally the only way to get it at the right angle. It's right out here and the saw won't reach, so that's a non-starter. And you would run into all sorts of problems on that. The question that the guy asked was, how do you cut a sharper bevel? Well, if you want to actually do it on the bevel, then again, you could jack this end of the saw up. You could make a wedge to go underneath it, or you could block it if you had a piece of wood under it, a block at this end, and again some means of clamping it. So this won't go high enough, but I will attempt to illustrate my point. I can block it at that end. I can clamp it, and with a bit of messing about, I can support it. Now, what I will say is, you've got to be dead careful here, because this piece is now unsupported, and as you put the saw through it, it's going to try and pinch on the blade, which is 9 times out of 10 going to cause you problems. You're going to get an inaccurate cut, you're going to get the blade wedged, and you're going to get all sorts of malarkey. So I would say, as a general rule, cutting on the upright on the bevel is just it's not a successful idea. Is it doable? Well, yeah, anything's doable if you try hard enough. But is it going to be successful? I would suggest no. If anyone has experience and thinks different, then by all means chuck it in the comments and let me know. But that's my thoughts on cutting on the bevel. Again, it's going to be easier if you're near the end of the timber. But again, the issue that you're going to have is clamping it in position and getting an accurate cut. So, like I say, can you do it? Yes. Is it outside the parameters that the machine was designed for? Yes, most definitely. If you had an almighty accident, would DeWalt support you? No, not a chance, because you're using it outside the parameters. Would I support you? No, not a chance, because I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just saying, well, I can see that's possible. I don't know whether I'd risk it or not, but I don't need to, because I've got the tools to do it. Oh, fabulous, Paul. Yeah, but that's why you buy tools. Also, there is an old-fashioned thing. I don't have one here. It's kind of got a handle on it, and it's got some teeth on it, and you can cut through things with it. You can do that. Perfectly safe. Unless you put your fingers under where the saw is because you're talking to the camera. Have I ever done that? No, no. Again, my apologies to the guy who commented on it. I am absolutely not saying you cannot do it. I'm absolutely saying it is possible to do it. But you, sir, and anyone else that debates doing something like this, just needs to consider their specific application, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it safely, and just survive the experiment, because nobody wants to be seeing people with fingers missing or an arm missing, digits missing, whatever, or in worse state than that because of an accident with power tools. Power tools cause enough drama already. So again, I don't want to bang on about like the safety police. I'll do a video about my experiences in safety because there is some relevance to it. And so I'll close with that. I hope it's been of some help. If it has, then feel free to share it and whatever. If you've got comments or questions, please chuck them below or put them on the website, oldmanwith.com. Use the Ask a Question button. And as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.